So, hello everyone. I'm André Veríssimo, editor-in-chief of Jornal de Negócios, which is the leading Portuguese business newspaper. And it's my pleasure to be the host of the panel, There's No Planet B, Options for One Planet Prosperity. And we will be having now some of the most anticipated speakers of Planetiers World Gathering. They are Mike Berners-Lee, Professor of Sustainability at Lancaster University, author of There Is No Planet B, and How Bad Are Bananas, the Carbon Footprint of Everything, that just had its 10-year update. He's also the founder of Small World Consulting, which helps businesses of every size and type to respond to the biggest challenges of our time. Mike is joining us from the Lake District in England. And in California, we have Mathis Wackernagel, PhD, who co-created Ecological Footprint Accounting and founded Global Footprint Network, a think tank focused on bringing about an economy in which we all can thrive within the means of our one planet. They provide detailed accounts of how much of the planet's biocapacity is used by cities, companies, and countries. They also run Earth Overshoot Day, which now reaches annually over 4 billion media impressions in over 100 countries. By the way, this year it landed on the 22nd of August. We'll also have Pernilla Strid, which is a journalist at Aktuell Hållbarhet. I hope I pronounced that well. Sweden's leading independent journal and event organizer on sustainability for professionals and decision makers. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to Planetiers World Gathering. Why are we not acting enough on climate change? What are the implications for businesses? Do we need global governance? These are some of the topics that will be discussed. Right now, we're going to have two brief presentations by Mike and Mathis, and I would pass on to Mathis for his presentation.
Thank you very much. It's so wonderful to see you all from the great distance of California. Here it's still early in the morning. You still had a wonderful day already in front of you. I don't know if you can see my slide. Let me see if it works. I'm actually okay. Here we go. Yeah, wonderful. So this is what I want to speak just quickly about, kind of our context. Essentially, the choice is very simple. The question is, do we want one planet prosperity or one planet misery? Because the one planet is not going away. That's really the choice in which we have to make. And that's also the theme of the work we are doing right now with 20 cities in Portugal, where we're trying to find out, city by city, what's their demand on resources, which we call the ecological footprint, and how much is actually available in each city and the region around it. Are they in balance? What are the risks? What's, I think, holding us back most is the way we talk about sustainability. Because what we haven't fully realized is that we live in a new world, and Mike will talk about that as well. That before we were in an empty world where we, humans, the human economy was small compared to the size of the planet. And today we have outgrown the planet. We are an overshoot. Overshoot is a word that is not translated in many languages. It's like going to a doctor. You have a disease and the doctor doesn't even know the name of the disease, even though it's a pervasive disease that we are using more rapidly the planet than it can renew. But the way we talk about is kind of odd, because it's like we are on a boat. We see a little cloud come, there's a storm coming, we're in a boat. Oh my God, the storm is getting bigger. And we realize, oh, my boat is not very strong and there's a big storm coming. And what's our reaction? Our reaction is to gather and say, okay, who is going to fix their boat first? I will not fix my own boat until everybody else is fixing their boat. That's so odd. Because the question really is, are you ready? If you're not ready with your boat, you are exposed with your boat. If you're not prepared, you're not prepared. So the situation is pretty straightforward. This is the context. Currently, our human demand, if we add up everything we eat, all the energy we use that requires ecological productive space to sequester the extra CO2, the fiber we need, the cities that occupy space and the roads, we add that all up and say, how much do we take compared to what Earth can renew? Our conservative estimates based on UN statistics tell us that we use at least 56% more than what Earth can renew. That's for the year 2020. Last year was a little bit more because of the lockdown. Our resource demand was lowered. So it's 1.56 Earth right now. So that's the same as from January 1st to August 22nd. We use as much as Earth can renew in the entire year. Now, this will end at one point. We have to live off the regeneration of the planet. Have to. That's just what physics dictates. The question really is, will we choose to get out of overshoot by disaster or by design? So COVID has forced us. It's not a systemic change, not a systemic improvement. It has forced us. We want to choose the path to the future. But the question is also, how much do we actually have available? You may say one planet, and indeed we have one planet available, you know. But actually, if we also want to leave space for biodiversity on which we depend, and to stabilize situations, we may not want to use, we people may not want to use the entire planet. E.O. Wilson proposes to use half of the Earth's capacity in order to maintain 85% of biodiversity. And so it becomes obvious that we are using about threefold the resources that are available on this planet. That's the current context in which we live. That's a storm. And the question is, how well is your boat? That's what we looked at, not just with the Portuguese cities that we're working with, but also in the context of businesses, recognizing that in this new context of where we are bigger than what Earth can renew, the question is starting to shift, even for businesses. It's not anymore, are we nice to the planet? I mean, that's a nice thing to do. That's good too. But the question is, if your business is not helping the planet, it's not helping humanity to succeed on this planet, then you're planning for your own obsolescence. Because if you offer something that will be needed more and more, your markets will open up. If not, it's going to be more and more difficult to find people who want to buy your products. So sustainability and economic success is far more linked. It's not about environment versus economy. It's about, are we choosing our future by design or by disaster? Are we choosing one planet prosperity or are we choosing one planet misery? That's the choice we have. And that's my introduction. And if you have questions, I'm looking forward to the conversation. Also, if you want to look at data, or you want to look at the report, there are some links here. Please visit us, and I'm looking forward to engage with you Planeteers. Thank you for being here.
Okay,
it's a joy to share this planet with you.
Thanks, Mathis. Mike, your turn.
Okay, well, I'm going to, well, likewise, it's a joy to be here. It's great to talk to you, and I'm going to echo much of what much of the sentiment that Mathis has just put across. So yeah, here we are. There's no Planet B. So a few top line thoughts from my most recent book. But so I'll just start with this little graph of global energy use by humans since 1850, and there it is going up and up and up. It's been going up for millennia actually, but over the last 50 years, it's been going up at a rate of 2.4% per year. That's like a double up every 30 years. And that energy, with that energy, it brings us many great things. It allows us technologies. It allows us to live longer and to live well, and so on. But it's also true to say that the more energy we use, the more we influence the planet that we're living on. And we do that through a mixture of accident and design. And it didn't matter that we were getting more powerful for millennia, but eventually the balance of power between us and the planet, as Mathis has described, has been changing. And really recently, the balance tipped completely. So to give an idea of how recently, 100 years ago, we couldn't trash the whole planet even if we tried, and we did try quite hard around that time. About 50 years ago or so, I don't know, we'd come to a point where we could make the whole planet hostile for humans to live on if we did something really stupid. But now we don't have to be particularly stupid. We are smashing the whole planet up at high speed just by not being careful enough. So we've entered this new era, and some people use a big word for it, and I'm just going to use that word as well. We've entered this era called the Anthropocene, where suddenly we are the big thing influencing the planet. And there's my little sketch of it. We used to be a small species running around on a big, robust playground of a planet. Suddenly, we're a big species on a fragile planet, and that is an entirely new context for humanity to be operating in, and it calls into question everything about how we do life, how we think, how we run society, how we do economics, how we do politics, what our values are, just about everything. And we've had a few decades of being in this Anthropocene, but being able to get away with still acting in ways that were honed in a previous era. But right now, and I mean 2020, 2021, this is the moment at which it's suddenly become clear that if we don't make that transition to an Anthropocene fit way of carrying ourselves, then the consequences are going to hit us really, really hard. So let's have a look at what that Anthropocene challenge looks like. Well, it's we face a whole load of joined up global systemic challenges, and here they are. And here just the physical ones, some of the physical ones, and we can't look at these one at a time. We have to hold them all in our head at the same time because they're so interconnected. So a climate emergency linked to that energy transition challenge, just as importantly, but gets less airtime, the biodiversity challenge, pollution, other pollutants, plastics, other pollutants. We need to feed a rising population. There are disease threats. All these things have to be dealt with at once. And the one-liner piece of good news about this is that we actually, broadly speaking, have the technologies to deal with all those things at once. And the real question is, what would it take then for us to be dealing with these technically solvable challenges? And that takes us into a whole load of other terrain about what kinds of things is it still okay to grow. We obviously can't keep growing our impacts, but it might still be okay to try and grow biodiversity and human well-being, for example. Economics that was honed in a different era, it's unsurprising that it needs at least some tweaks. The implications for business are enormous. The implications for technology are enormous, because although technology has brought us many great things and we need it going forwards, it's also true to say that technology has taken us to the very dangerous point that we're at now. There are huge questions about how we do politics, how inequality works in the world, and investment, because every time we spend money or invest money, we're pushing for one future or another. And then right at the center of this, and it's amazing how many technical experts have agreed with me on this point, there are questions about human values, what kinds of values will allow us to thrive in the Anthropocene, and what kind of evolution of the way that we think is going to be required of us. So just a couple of points on climate change specifically to emphasize. Very, very quickly, our progress so far on this. Here's a graph of our carbon emissions from energy use. It's going up pretty well exactly as we might have predicted it would have done if humans had never noticed that climate change was an issue. So it's a huge need to raise our game. The sum total of the actions that we've had so far actually can't be detected on this curve yet. So that's the crux, the most interesting part of the climate change phenomenon has been the human reaction to it. So the real question of what would it take for humans to wake up and have and bring about the huge systemic change that is required across all the areas that I've touched on in order for us to live in an Anthropocene fit way and to thrive. So we really are in a race between tipping points now. And so on the one hand, I think the evidence of the last 2 years is that actually it's incredibly encouraging that humans have started to wake up. School kids taking to the streets, Extinction Rebellion, the kinds of conversations that are happening in businesses, a few businesses really starting to take on an Anthropocene fit response. And I think that's pretty new. Against that, on the right-hand side of my slide, I have explosions of methane coming out of permafrost and forest fires, and I could have put a whole load of different, quite scary symptoms of climate change starting to emerge. So it's an absolute emergency, and the implications for business are huge. It goes a long way beyond. It includes managing carbon emissions downwards, but it goes a long way beyond that. It involves asking the question about everything the business is doing. Are we doing what it takes to help to create the conditions under which the systemic change that we need to see can become possible? So here in the Anthropocene, it's no good for a business to exist primarily to make profit. All businesses now have to exist primarily for the health of people and planet in some way or other. And that requires big holistic thinking. And there are some examples now of some businesses really starting to show some leadership. So, that's all I have to say by way of context. We have the chance to live better than ever, arguably, but it's clear cut that if we don't, we're going to experience some pretty bad times. So everything to play for. We should be excited and scared. Those are my opening thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Before passing on to Pernilla, I'd just like to say that we are open for questions from our audience, so please send them in. Pernilla, and I take the conversation to you.
So thank you for inviting me to this lovely meeting. I'm happy to be part of it, and thank you for your presentations. It's really hard to comprehend, I think, for most people, that we have a window of about 10 years to act before it's really too late. So what do you think, Mike, what will it take for humanity to wake up?
Well, it's about this big system change, and when you start pushing at a system, sometimes you can push and push and push, you get no progress. But actually, if you're creating the conditions under which that change becomes possible, the moment can come around really quite suddenly in which there's a big flip, and humanity wakes up, and the politics and the business and the science and everything comes together all at once. And I think, I haven't got a silver ball, but I think that if you look at what's happened over the last couple of years, there is cause for hope that we could be very close to that tipping point. And if we all push hard now, we don't know for sure, but certainly the harder we push, the better our chances are of making that huge change.
So Mathis, what would you say, what will happen if we actually fail?
I would say the first thing is, obviously we are in an emergency, as Mike said. And at the same time, it's not an on and off switch, like an electric switch. That's either totally fail or we succeed. I think the more productive question to ask yourself is, are you prepared yourself? If you're not prepared, you're not prepared. This overshoot in climate change and the resource constraints we see is a context for everybody. And it's a very interesting participation because it's a positive sum game. It's not like in a soccer championship where only one team wins and everybody else lose. The more people are able to prepare themselves for the future that is going to come so that actually they will be protected themselves, the more also the world as a whole will be a stable place. So ask yourself, what's your risk exposure? How does your city have to transform to be able to operate in the world that we can anticipate without fossil fuel, with much more resource constraint, with climate change? How can your business operate? How can your household operate? It's not about waiting. You are in the game. Do you have truly skin in the game? I think you have, because if you're not ready, you're not ready.
So Mike, talking about businesses, since we are in this incredibly serious situation, what should businesses actually, how should they think? What should they do now?
okay, they should look at everything that they're doing and ask themselves, are we in every way that we can helping to create the conditions under which the big change that we need becomes possible? So perhaps I'll give you one example. So this is a business that we've been working with. It's called Brewdog. It's a brewery. It's got bars and restaurants. And, you know, first of all, they started off saying, okay, so what can we do to cut our carbon footprint radically in line with 1.5 degrees? And of course, every business should be doing that. And the bit that we can't get rid of, how can we plant biodiverse forests, natural solutions in the most ecologically friendly way to take twice as much carbon as our carbon footprint out of the air right from now. So that's good, all the carbon management stuff. But they're also saying, what can we be writing on our beer cans to make sure everybody understands this? How can we be lobbying politicians? How can we be lobbying the business world? How can we be running conferences on this? How can we be encouraging people who drink beer to learn how to mend their clothes instead of buying new clothes? You know, all this, how can we push in every way? It's a very big, deep, systemic look at, holistic look at everything we can do. And, more and more businesses are starting to get this. And, it's exciting, the impact it has on what it feels like to drink their beer, what it feels like to go to work in that company. It's absolutely an opportunity for them. And, it makes everything to do with their company just so much more exciting.
So Mathis, when you look around, what do you see? Are businesses really rising to the challenge now?
Some are, as Mike says, others are not. And I think the piece I would like to add to Mike is, because it may sound as just a noble cause. Businesses are there kind of to make profits, you would think. Why should they also take on sustainability? Actually, it's far more essential for them to take it on than most business schools would teach. Because if you're not fit for the future we can anticipate, you bear the burden. You are planning for your own obsolescence. That's why we're working with the company, with Schneider Electric. They have 140,000 employees around the world, and that's their essence. They recognize more Schneider, better planet, because what they offer is the solutions that humanity needs. Humanity's success is much more likely with Schneider being effective, for example, because they offer decarbonization and digitalization. That's where we need to move. We need to electrify our energy system and decarbonize it, and use the energy much more efficiently. And so they measure every quarter. The CEO wants to know, how much CO2 have we saved in the world compared to how much CO2 does it take to operate our company? Are we getting physically better as a company to produce more CO2 savings with less effort? Because that's what the world needs. So they are fully charged up, because everybody works there knows, wow, we are needed for humanity's success. They can talk fully about the sustainability challenge because they're not afraid. They don't have to hide behind a wall. So many companies just think it's a noble thing and they talk nice about it, but actually they're not transforming their business model. And that's like driving blind on the highway. That's not very safe. Like if your car goes down the ravine, the question is not, that's what's happening. Do you want to be behind the steering wheel, or do you want to sit on the hood? And most companies still sit on the hood. And Schneider Electric is one of the companies, and Mike is working with others, that are saying, no, it's better to be behind the steering wheel and help get control of the situation, not just for the world, but for the sake also of the company. Schneider Electric started in 1880. So they're looking ahead and saying, like, it's not for sure that you'll be around for that long. What does it take for us? And you'll be around if you'll be needed. It's as simple as that.
So businesses really need investors. And in the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about sustainable finance. We've had the task force on climate-related financial disclosures. We had the EU taxonomy. And soon to come, the task force on nature-related financial disclosures. So what's your opinion? Are these really signs of change in the financial sector?
Yeah, one of the things that's encouraged me is I've been increasingly working with asset managers, on this question of how to look at portfolios and companies, and assess whether their impact on the world. And the seriousness of that conversation has really been going up. So investors are asking, how can we create a world in which fiduciary duty is defined as more than just maximizing financial value shareholders, so that an asset manager feels at risk of being sued for negligence if he is not shown to be looking after the planet properly, for the grandchildren of the shareholders. So, that would be a shift in and we've been, asked to, develop to look at very holistically at companies, so that, for example, for Facebook, it's more than just looking at what's their carbon footprint and what are they doing it. It's what's their climate narrative? What are they telling the world about this? And if we really want to deal with a climate emergency, we're going to need good functioning democracies, and we're going to need the people of the world to be able to sift fact from fiction. So the real questions for Facebook are, what is your role in that? To what extent are you enabling or disabling the world to see fact from fiction? So big holistic look at this. And companies that are well positioned, who have a product offering that enables a world to transition to low carbon, well, they've absolutely got a business opportunity. And companies that are wedded either to old thinking or infrastructure that requires fossil fuel or something, they're exposed. And so asset managers increasingly are getting, from two sides. They're asking, which companies are, which companies are dangerous for us to hold money in now? And they're also asking, because we personally care about this stuff, and our investors increasingly care about this stuff, which companies do we feel good about, and which companies will our shareholders our investors feel good about investing in? So I think that's changing, and that's, of course, pushing the trillions in the right direction is hugely influential.
Mathis, are you as
Absolutely.
optimistic? Are we seeing the sustainability of financial flows increasing?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's about optimism or pessimism. I was trained as an engineer, and you never ask an engineer if he's optimistic or she's optimistic or pessimistic. You just say, how strong is the bridge? So we can calculate. Sustainability is actually a very practical problem. It's a very necessary issue to deal with. It's not just a noble hobby for the weekends. And whether the finance market is prepared, I see stronger signs. I mean, there's like Mark Carney as an example of somebody who leads a central bank and being so clear about the implications of climate change and the potential of stranded assets. What shocks me is like when a president, like the president of the United States, sneezes, the stock market budges. Wow, but then you sign the Paris Agreement or you ratify the Paris Agreement, you don't even see that on the stock market line. Like, it's shocking. Like, so either they know everything already, they have already calculate the whole future into their present value, or they're totally clueless. It's either one or the other, in some ways. Now, I think the cluelessness has a bit vanished, has gone down over the time, but I think the value proposition is pretty obvious. If you own, as Mike said very clearly, if you own assets that depend on the climate we have today, or the resource availability we have today, that will not be available in the future, then you own things that will lose value, and they will lose value at a time when the economy is particularly weak. When you build a house today, it will be around for many decades. If you build a road today, it will be around for many decades. If you build a windmill today, it will be around for many decades. So your assets have long lives compared to the speed at which we are changing the situation on this planet. So you can predict quite easily which assets will be helpful and which assets will be liabilities in the future. Now, has the financial market fully recognized that? I don't think so. But that's also opportunities, because as investors start to see that we undervalue the great assets and we overvalue the potentially disastrous assets, money can shift very quickly. I think we're seeing that trend slowly, but as Mike also showed, is that the curves of CO2 emissions even have a hard time to distinguish wise choices. You don't see the 1992 climate change convention in it. You don't see the Paris Agreement in it. You see COVID. You see disasters. You don't see design yet. I want to see design shift its curve.
So, as an individual, Mike, it is quite easy to feel despair and hopelessness, and we all have 10 years. What can I do as an individual? And in your book, you've really written that we're quite powerful actually as individuals. Can you explain and tell us what are the really powerful things we can do as individuals?
On, because as I've said, we have these global systemic challenges, and each one of us is just 1/7.8 billionth of the situation, right? And even if you run a big company, you're still a speck in the global system. And so, but the question to ask is much more than how can I cut my carbon footprint, or how can I, it's to, although that is part of it, but it's the question to ask, the same for companies and individuals, is how can I help to create the conditions under which the systemic change that we need to see can become possible? And that's partly about my own lifestyle, but it's also about all the influence that I could have. So it's about, of course, it's about how I vote. It's about how I influence my politicians. It's about how I influence my workplace. It's about, possibly most challenging of all, how I influence my family and my friends. It's about creating this this world in which everything we do is helping to bring people with us. And a reality about humans is that most of us like to be like everybody else most of the time. So every time we find a way forward that works, we bring people with us. We make things. If you do something that's leading, you make it a lot easier for other people to go and do the same thing too. And I'm just going to chip this thing in because we have to have the change now. And I think, and I don't say this as somebody who thinks, oh, goody, won't it be fun to take to the streets? But I think it's clear cut that some of the peaceful, positive, and insistent protest that we've seen over the last couple of years has undoubtedly helped to shift the dial, and it's helped to move it's given permission within the business world, it's given permission within the political world. And one thing that's clear is it's absolutely no good waiting for our politicians to take the lead on this. That just won't happen. They should be showing all the leadership they can, but the leadership is going to come from individuals, and really importantly, and I'm more hopeful about this than I used to be, really importantly, I think there's a big opportunity for serious leadership from the business community as well.
Perhaps just to add to that, if I may. Yeah, I think an interesting parallel learning opportunity is the pandemic that we have been experiencing over the last month and soon a year. Since wow. And we haven't handled it particularly well, but I think there's some interesting lessons, some parallel lessons. I think one lesson is you alone cannot change the pandemic. It's not you alone, but still, clearly, you have skin in the game. It affects you. And what is interesting and parallel to sustainability or climate change is that the best way to act is to protect yourself, and through that, protect everybody else. And if the government is not able to provide a very powerful context to deal with it, you're even more exposed, and you need to be even more proactive in protecting yourself. And that's the same with sustainability. So it's not so much that you alone have the whole burden of turning everything around. This is the context in which you operate, and by doing the right thing, by recognizing that we will have to operate without fossil fuels in a climate changed world with less resources, and you prepare your life, whether it's a city, a company, your own household, your country, in that direction, it gets easier for everybody as well. And clearly, if we coordinate, it gets even easier. So if COP26 gets delayed by 1 year, it doesn't mean delaying action for a year. Actually, it means accelerating our actions, our personal actions, by 2 years, because we don't have the benefit of the global coordination that we need. So I think that's how we have to hold it. It's very parallel to COVID. And we see the failures and the successes around it, and that actually we are in it together. We are one biology. Your health and my health are connected. and by protecting myself, I protect you.
So in a crisis, it's always good to have some simple steps, wear a life vest, use a mask. And if now we have about 10 years and we start to panic, it would be nice to have some simple steps, some simple rules to cling to. Can you give some advice there? I'll start with you, Mike.
Okay, so was at the individual level or the business level? It's the same, actually. In many ways, it's the same. So the first thing is, just in terms of your impact, and we'll stick with your climate impact to start with, try and get a good enough understanding of what the things are in your life that, what makes up your carbon footprint, if you like. And, for the average UK person, it's about a quarter of it is the food that you eat, about a quarter of it is the way that you travel, about a quarter of it is the stuff you buy and the way you invest your money, and about a quarter of it is to do with your household energy. And then it's like, pick your battles. Pick a few big, significant things that you can really make a change with, and then be creative about it. Find a way of making your life better, not worse, as you make a change. There's one thing we need to emphasize, there's the opportunity to enhance the experience of being alive just by living better, and the transition to a more sustainable future will feel fantastic. We will all feel, it weighs down on us all that we know, my generation has all my life, I've lived in a world in which the science has been saying one thing and everything about society has been pushing me to live in another way, and that's horribly conflicting. If we sort that out, our experience of being alive will just be so much better. The first thing, that's the carbon footprint. And then, as I've explained, for businesses and individuals, that's one part of it, and the rest of it is ask about the other things you can do, the ways you can influence. The way you can make sure your MPs know, the way you can, and every time you spend or invest money, you are pushing for, this goes for people and businesses, every time you spend or invest money, you are pushing for one future or another. So understand the supply chains, understand what you're buying, ask yourself whether you need to buy it at all, and just push for the future you want.
So I'll close with just one very short question. Or make the answer short, because then we have to pass over to André Veríssimo for some questions from the audience. But now that we have these 10 years, when we start to see this systemic change, what is it going to look like, do you think? Mike?
Okay, so I think we'll feel some energy around it, a mixture of fear and real positive energy. Because I think it'll actually feel great to be starting to do the right thing collectively. Will be a huge psychological relief to us all, actually. I think it'll feel brilliant. And I think, we'll start to feel healthier. We'll be doing things like walking and cycling more. We'll be repurposing jobs so that more of that will be going to work in ways that feel more meaningful. The pressure that we put on ourselves at work will become more imposed from within, from ourselves, rather than from outside. I think, our diets will become healthier, our countryside will start looking better. So I just think there'll be a kind of a rise in the vitality, of everything. And there'll be one or two areas where we have to show some discipline. Like, there's a hard reality, can't fly as much as we'd like to. We can still fly for really good reasons, actually. But, there are one or two places where we'll have to just have some discipline. But overall, I think it'll just feel great. And I think while we're at it, our communities will get stronger. The quality of our personal relationships will get better. Because it's such a holistic thing, this transition.
So thank you. I think that's really encouraging.
Okay.
I think now we have to pass over to André for some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pernilla. We're still waiting for those questions, so please send them in. But I would like to take the chance to ask Mike and Mathis. Portugal is a small peripheral country in the southernmost, westmost coast of Europe. What all this that we have been hearing means for a country like Portugal. Mathis, I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody, I mean, we all think we are exceptional. I always say exceptionalism is universal. What does it mean for me? In the end, I think the big question is, are we committing to our own success? And what does success mean? Success means being able to operate well within the budget that is available. And I think, as Mike said, by doing that, it unleashes a lot of very positive powers. You know, I see that with companies that are aligned with the purpose where we need to go. People feel excited to work there, and they're not constantly in this conflict of no, oh, actually we should do this, but we are doing that, and then dampening their own spirits. The good future, how do we build the future? Decision by decision. Are our decisions consistent with the vision we have? Perhaps the most important advice for anybody is to sleep enough, because when you sleep enough, your brain gets a bit clearer, and we need clear brains to make good decisions. It's really about committing to your own success, and the success that also works in the context that we operate, because that will also amplify the successes of everybody else, because success is very easily defined for humanity. It's for all to thrive within this one planet that we have. And that's true for Portugal, it's true for Switzerland, where I'm from, it's true for Mali, it's true for any place.
Mike, you mentioned air travel. Tourism has a big weight in the Portuguese economy. Any thoughts on the impact?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, you know, the exact shape of the transition is different for, you know, for all of us and for every country, depending on the position it's in. And, you know, Portugal, it's true that Portugal is going to probably going to need to have fewer flights coming in and out. But maybe that can be people staying for longer and having really special experiences when they come to Portugal. Maybe a lot more of your Portuguese people can be doing tourism in Portugal as well. In other areas of your economy, you have huge advantages over, say, the UK, where we have the 5th worst sunlight per person in the UK of any major country in the world. And you know, Portugal has far more sunlight, and sunlight is going to be the big energy source for the world. So, you know, there's some reshaping of the economy. I'm not saying no tourism at all, but maybe a different kind of tourism. Less people showing up for the weekend and more people spending, you know, weeks, I don't know, walking across the whole country or something. So it's just the open-mindedness to explore what the opportunities are, the different kinds of opportunities are in this new context. I think, you know, it's a lack of imagination that holds a lot of people back, because it's easy to see what you might lose about the current situation. But it takes a bit of imagination and time and you know, some reflection to pause and think, yeah, but okay, but what are those new things that you know, that could be far better than anything we've got at the moment?
Okay, thanks very much. We have to close. Our time is up. Thanks very much, Mike, Mathis, Pernilla. Have a nice day. Thank you. Big applause, please. Thanks very much. And we end with this panel. We had a wake-up call, but also many messages of hope and, in fact, the importance that we have as individuals and companies. Thanks very much. Thank you.